And they didn't know he was still alive. So what is interesting is, this kind of traditional music was studied in an untraditional way. The traditional way of learning folk music is you go and you apprentice yourself with the, master musician, and, they play and you play and they listen to you and they correct you, and the sort of, the age-old way of traditionally learning music. These guys encountered the music through a medium and then discovered the musicians behind it, and the revival of this music in a very interesting way, including the fact that the recordings they made then became the authoritative works to be recreated by the next wave of musicians, as this became an international phenomenon. So you had musicians in Berlin and in Melbourne, like listening to these recordings that were coming out of New York and San Francisco, and they were learning from the new recordings, recreating the old recordings. And media use also have a very interesting generational significance. Much of the language to talk about from the literature, how do you talk to young people today, and they're often identified with a medium. So, for example, the iPod generation, for example, which by now I think is already a little dated, but 5 years ago that was the way of identifying the youth. And this is not new. My favorite example. It's an article appeared in the Jewish Daily Forward in the 1920s, and it was about disputes in families, Jewish families in the United States, over whether they should buy a phonograph or a radio. And that the split was along generational lines. The older generation liked the phonograph, the younger generation liked the radio. The older generation liked the phonograph because you could play the music that was familiar to you again and again and again. And the younger generation liked the radio because it allowed you to access whatever was new. And and this idea of media marking generational splits in terms of what medium you're comfortable with and what media you have facility with is still very much a discussion today, as teachers walk into classrooms and they're having trouble with, whatever, the technology, and then, the kid has to come up and fix it for you. And of course, this is, to a certain extent, not a new problem. In terms of some sort of pedagogical suggestions to draw out of this, I think one of the things to think about is how to draw on and to develop students' media literacy, not only their technical facility, but their facility having grown up in a different culture of media technologies. They will have different facilities. Facility with visual culture that's very developed. Of course, digital technologies, multitasking. Some people have even argued that this is changing the cognitive development of young people, and that there may be new facilities at the expense of old ones, like the ability to memorize, the ability to concentrate, the ability to read long text. Is challenged by new set of cognitive skills that are being developed through their media practices. And I don't know the science so much as I know the discourse. The fact that the discourse suggests that it feels like students' brains are being wired differently is in and of itself significant, and it's something to be reckoned with. I think as educators working with media, there's a tendency I've noticed for many of my colleagues who are really text people, that when it comes to using other media, films, recordings, websites, that they treat these as self-explanatory, and they will, I've seen colleagues of mine say, well, this film speaks for itself. And of course, no film speaks for itself any more than a text speaks for itself, and that these require critical thinking and curatorial advanced preparation on the part of teachers in using these materials. And part of it is developing a facility and a comfort with that are not part of one's pedagogical training, or not part of one's skill set, and learning how to draw on the critical thinking skills one has for text study or other areas one is familiar with and applying them to these other technologies. And in teaching this material, the importance of calling students' attention to the constructed nature of a lot of this media. When I teach courses on media, and we talk about documentary films in particular, I like to bring a filmmaker into class to talk about how a film was made, because students will tend to see a film, and especially a documentary film, as unmediated actuality, and in fact it's as constructed as any other work of art, and but the constructed nature of it isn't necessarily apparent, and that's, I think, an important awareness for teachers, and can be a valuable teaching tool as well. Also, calling students' attentions to media works and their epiphenomena, the things that are happening around the media work. So that a film or a television program doesn't stand on its own, but it's surrounded by reviews, by public debate. It appears in the press, it appears online, and that by having students pay attention to this, it encourages them to think of their own watching and listening as part of media work, that they're not passive recipients, which is often how people are thought of, is sitting in front of a television set or a computer screen, but they are engaged audiences, and that they should do so thoughtfully and critically and responsibly. The other pedagogical thing is to think about media not only related to this, it's not only form and content, it's also the social practice. This doesn't only apply to social networking media, this applies to all media. Listening to the radio is being part of an imagined national audience. Television watching is something that is both widely shared and also very intimate, as this still very domestic medium. And in my own work on studying the Holocaust in American television, this to me was really key of understanding how television had a really singular impact on Americans, not just Jewish Americans, but all Americans. Embrace of this is something that is meaningful to Americans, is that the encounter took place in the comfort and privacy and intimacy of the home. And which is different than going to a movie theater and seeing a film. The film festival also is another example of a social encounter. The difference between seeing a film at a Jewish film festival, which is an event that is at its bottom an act of group affirmation. Why drag yourself off to a Jewish film festival when you can get the film on Netflix, or when it's going to be on television in a month anyway, or you had a chance to see it in a local movie theater. The film festival as a collective experience has become an important part of many Jews' sense of communal affirmation, and in some communities, it is the form of communal affirmation. One of the things in the film festival is they do surveys of their audiences, and they say, there are many people say, this is the only Jewish thing I do. I look forward to it all year, and this is my chance to be part of a Jewish community in this practice. And however that may sit with one's own sense of possible for Jewish practice, that is significant to note, and it's a recent development, and I think an important development. So finally, I was looking on the Jesna wiki, and there were some interesting concerns raised. And I want to end with sort of thinking about some of these concerns and my own thinking about them in relation to my work. One was raised about the concern of new media technologies as a threat to authority, and especially, the internet as really hefkers. Anybody can put anything up on the internet. And this is not a new concern. I was thinking about, printed books in the vernacular were seen as a real threat to rabbinic authority when they first started to appear on the scene. So, like in the Ashkenazic world in the 16th century, that you begin to appear. So at one point, there's a Yiddish translation of the Shulchan Aruch, and that goes beyond the pale, and the books are confiscated and destroyed.